All right, hi everyone. We are here with Mr. Mike Taylor, otherwise known as the Politics Mike. This Mike in particular knows a lot about politics, and that is what we are going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the DNC. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us.
It's my pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
So first off, I know you've been watching the DNC all week. I have too. We have turned down for what? It's amazing in there. As you're watching this, what kind of strikes you about this convention versus maybe past conventions, or perhaps that GOP convention that took place only a month ago, but seems like light years away?
Well, first of all, I would say every convention seems to have its own individual, I guess flavor is the word you'd want to use, or style.
Hmm.
This convention really is just a party. I would say it is, people have been making, comparisons to 2008. And I do see some comparisons to 2008, not just in the style, but even in the kind of format of the stage and everything. It's very similar to how the convention in Denver was back then.
Right.
But the striking contrast between the Republican convention and the Democratic convention, I think, was most evident in the roll call when you had, an older woman traditionally going up to the podium and saying, "We're going to now go conduct the delegation count to see if we have enough delegate votes for Donald J. Trump to secure the nomination." It was very, very sparsely attended and compared to the Democratic convention, almost a snooze fest. And when you compare that to Little John coming down with the spotlight on him. When you compare that to Gavin Newsom talking over "They Not Like Us" but Kendrick Lamar. When you compare the two, I mean, it's like going from the Arctic to Hawaii. It's like a completely different temperature, completely different environment. And I think it's reflected in the campaigns. You have two completely different campaigns. You have a
Right.
campaign that's literally focused on the past. Everything is focused. The literal slogan, "Make America Great Again," was
Hmm.
originally used by Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And the very fact that they want to return to a previous time, compared to the Harris campaign, which is all about the 21st century, moving into the next 4 years with a president the likes of which this country has never seen before, with challenges the country has never seen before, two wars. The economy, of course, is still a little down, but look, we've got under 3% in inflation, first time since 2021. So we're about to elect the fifth president of the 21st century. And
Right.
it comes at a time when there's increasing cultural change, increasing diversity in the nation's electorate. You've got so many social issues that are out there. You have the Republicans who are talking about critical race theory as a wedge issue. They're talking about transgenders taking over the world of sports. And then on the left side, they're talking about the banning of books. They're talking
Right.
about, making sure that Project 2025, which is could be summarized as the consolidation of power in the administrative state and the executive branch and their removal of the administrative state,
Yeah.
is never enacted. And it's like night and day. And I think that this election is really a fever pitch of, the increasing disparity between the two different Americas that have been cultivating over the years. John Edwards famously was campaigning in 2007 on this idea of two different Americas, and I think it's apt now. We have the America
Yeah.
that subscribes to this, very predominantly white version of history and of what they want to see in the next 4 years, and then you have a multiracial group of folks who want to see human rights in every facet of and every among every demographic. That you want to see the progressive issues enacted, like the child tax credit. They want to see, you know, LGBTQ community members not discriminated against in any respect. They want
Right.
to see women have autonomy over their own bodies. They want to have their kids free from mass shootings in schools. I mean, the contrasts could not be more great as they are right now. I think this is probably the most exciting election probably since the year 2000, in my view.
I completely agree with you, and I would not have agreed with that statement maybe a month ago. I would have been like, oh, God. And it feels like, things have been very reinvigorated. I want to ask you a question because I heard Donald Trump saying, uh, something about suburban women. There was some poll saying suburban women were not behind him, which is so weird because don't they want to not have credit cards anymore too? But turns out they don't. And he was saying like, no, that those polls must be wrong because suburban women love me. And as a suburban woman who has kids in schools, just want to do a quick temperature check here. What do you think is a bigger problem in schools? Children getting shot or a book where a girl has two mommies? Just think about it. Don't, I know that that's a big one to think about. Just tell me which one you think is a bigger problem. I'm curious.
I'll say, well, I don't. The last time I've heard, I never saw a book with two mommies kill anyone. So I'm of
Oh,
the opinion that the mass
yeah,
shootings are the most important issue. And when
huh,
we look at, the fact that this is the only industrialized economy really in the world that experiences this high level of mass shooting, not just in schools, but in grocery stores and libraries and bowling alleys. I mean, the world is looking at us and they're very confused as to how a sophisticated, advanced society like the United States of America could tolerate this. We this is the country that put a man on the moon. We have achieved so much. We are the dominant superpower coming out of World War II, and yet more folks in the United States have died because of a mass shooting incident than in all of the wars the United States have been involved in combined.
yeah,
And so, you know, again, these issues are meant to distract. They're meant to create a straw man for folks to focus on and draw false equivalencies with. Because the truth of the matter is, even these Republicans, none of these Republicans would want their kids to ever be the victim of a mass shooting. None of them.
right,
And what the Republican Party has been successful in doing is portraying this issue as just a scare tactic from the left to take away your Second Amendment rights. And the beauty behind the Democratic Party's message is that we have someone like Tim Walz, who's a hunter, running for vice president. We have candidates who have, regularly engage in shooting activities, saying we're not trying to take away your Second Amendment rights, but we also want to make sure that there's certain protections and restrictions so that we can mitigate the instances of these kinds of horrific events. And I just believe that this candidate that we have, Vice President Kamala Harris, is going to make that case very clear on the debate stage. Of course, we have the March for Our Lives rally. I was there back in 2018. The atmosphere was just, I said this many times before, TV did not do it justice.
yeah,
Washington, D.C. was packed
yeah,
with with folks all over the electorate, all over the United States, across demographics, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, young, old. It was it, comparable to probably Obama's inauguration almost, not to the
yeah,
same level, of course, but in terms of the multiracial coalition that just came together for this one singular purpose. It was an amazing experience, and the speakers were incredible, and it was a very well disciplined campaign.
yeah,
I remember, there were organized volunteers making sure they were getting your phone number so that they could have you text your respective representative in Congress. And there was, if you didn't know what you were going to text them, they had a boilerplate letter for you to text them and just put your name attached to it. This was a very well-oiled campaign, and that's the kind of discipline that I'm looking forward to seeing as it pertains to this issue in the fall campaign, and not just this issue, but every other issue. Roe versus
yeah,
Wade. This is the first election since 1972 where Roe versus Wade is not the law of the land, and that's a problem. Because as we've seen on the convention floor, there are people, real stories where folks have endured horrific incidents like rape, where people had life and death situations, where people tried to have children and just couldn't, and to restrict them from getting the adequate medical attention that they need is inhumane. And putting a human face behind these stories is exactly what the Democratic Party needs to do. I mean, this convention so far has been well run. The only criticism is that it ran a little bit too late the first night, but
yeah.
it's been an awesome experience. President Biden, I think, has been an incredible champion for all of
Yep.
these issues. The only administration that has prioritized student loan debt forgiveness. I mean, I think as we move forward, further and further along in the 21st century, we're going to realize how much of a consequential president Joe Biden is. And usually, first term presidents don't really get that much attention. But
Yeah.
this president has accomplished so much that it's almost as if he had two terms already. When you look at the realm of the economy, Trump has blown up the economy by nearly $2 trillion. How he got the reputation of Mr. Economy, I will never know. The Tax
Right.
Cuts and Jobs, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, his signature legislative achievement, 82% of those tax cuts went to the top 1% of American and
Yeah.
corporation. Just on a side-by-side comparison level, I mean, Trump is not the best candidate for the economy, yet poll after poll shows that more Americans trust him with the economy than Vice President Harris. It's like having a group of second graders
Hmm.
and you're telling them, look, I can either give you ice cream or spinach for your reward for your test. And they say, no, we want spinach, right? Because the spinach commercial had a cartoon on it. So this is the person we want. And you're saying, but this is gonna taste better. This is gonna make you celebrate more. This is gonna be an exciting. No, we want spin. And that's basically what the United States is dealing with right now. We are dealing with, what many call a vibes campaign, where
Yes.
people are less inclined to believe facts, data, and just nonpartisan sources of information, and they're gravitating towards feelings. And Trump has succeeded in making people feel as if he's the better candidate for the economy and the border. The border is another issue. I'm so excited
Right.
to see Harris go at it with Trump on because they have, the Republicans seem to have win on the issue of the border.
Right.
That all came to a screeching halt this year when twice the Republican House and Republican Senate were given the opportunity. I'm sorry, the Republican controlled House and the Republicans in the Senate were given the opportunity to pass a border bill written by a senator from a landlocked state, Oklahoma, James Langford. You
Yeah.
cannot say that he's a liberal in any way.
Right.
And they were getting everything they wanted in this bill. And because Trump said, I want to campaign on this issue, they tanked it. They
Yeah.
forfeited the right to make the argument about the border because they chose chaos intentionally for political gain.
Yes. And as someone who lives in a border state where all those border crossings are happening, you know, what rings hollow to me is everywhere you look, around you, you see immigrants building things, making new restaurants that are delicious, like I mean, this entire town, a lot of it was built by immigrants. And so this idea that like we just need to keep all of them out. And it's like, but they have brought so much to our lives and we are living those lives and we are living with those immigrants that we let in and you know we're I'm not getting shot by immigrants. I'm not, overrun by drug traffickers. Like I'm not seeing it, So it's like they're trying to tell us that there's this huge dystopia happening. But when I, exist in my life in my city, which is just a few hours away from the border, I don't see it. It doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm hoping that people will take that time to look around at their community and see where the immigrants are and see that they actually made things better and not worse.
Yeah, and Trump's approach to the border is about building. It's less about building walls and more about building narratives.
Yeah.
It's like deciding to host a big block party and then complaining it's too loud. When they were given the opportunity, when they're given the opportunity to do something about this, right? This was a Republican dream bill. I just want folks to understand this. Democrats were not getting much out of this bill, other than the
Right.
fact that they can finally put to rest this notion that Biden wasn't doing anything on the border.
Yeah.
They were getting everything they wanted in this bill, and they said no. And so
Mm-hmm.
what that tells you is that all of the talk about America first is BS. I mean, John McCain had the phrase America first, and I believe he meant it. But this is
Yeah.
a different Republican Party. And there's a reason why we have people like Jeff Duncan, the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Adam Kinzinger, the governor of Mesa, Arizona, a border state, is not just saying that he's not endorsing Trump, but he's trying to get others in his party to do the same,
Yeah.
right? And Jamie Raskin even said, I don't think JD Vance got the memo as to why there's a vacancy for the vice
Yeah.
presidency because they tried to kill his predecessor. So we're in a situation where so many prominent Republican figures have openly said either they're not going to endorse this candidate, Trump, and or they're saying I'm embracing the Democratic nominee, even though I disagree with them on virtually every issue. It's better to
Yeah.
have someone I disagree with, but can still agree that we're upholding the Constitution, than to have someone that's just diametrically opposed to the very system that America has been based on, the system of checks and balances, the system of
Exactly.
the idea that no man is above the law, and the Supreme Court has to be more of a prominent issue in this campaign. I have haven't heard enough from Harris about the Supreme Court, but that has to change
Yes.
because
Yes. I
Biden
completely agree with you there.
Biden can't do this alone. I mean, we understand he's wrapping up his presidency. He decided not to run for reelection after from his party. This cannot be just the sitting president's priority. This has to be the Democratic Party's priority. The Supreme Court has already signaled time after time again that they have no intention on putting a check on the executive branch as long
Yep.
as Trump has as long as Trump has a chance of getting back into the White House. Let's be real. I don't believe that the Supreme Court decision that came out this summer about presidential immunity was intended for President Joe Biden.
Nope. It
I just don't
certainly
believe
was
that.
not. Certainly was not. No. So, Mike, I know that you talk a lot about kind of educating young voters, and younger voters maybe don't tend to pay as much attention to politics as older voters. Something like Social Security, Medicare, it's going to fall on maybe more deaf ears because they have decades before they have to worry about that sort of thing. But one thing that I do want to talk about for young voters is what you are voting for, and I'm going to ask them to look long term here because I think when you are voting for the Republican Party in its current incarnation, what you are voting for is a slow decline. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Look at the states with the worst education, the worst economies, the worst, you know, survival birth rates, all those bad metrics that indicate whether or not you're living in a good, successful place where you can thrive and prosper, or a place where, it's much, much harder to do that. And a lot of those states that are at the bottom in all of those rankings, they're all Republican led states. They have Republican governors and Republican legislatures, and they are not doing well. Now, I will talk about Texas since I live here. Roe v. Wade, the overturning of that happened. Um, of course, abortion clinics shut down, but there's a lot of OBGYNs who don't want to practice medicine here anymore because it's too hard and they're too worried about getting sued and they can't provide the kind of care that they need for their patients. And it's really frustrating to have a patient to know what they need and not be able to give it to them and send them home and tell them to come back when they're really, really sick instead of just really sick. Like who would want to be here for that? So those people are going to leave. The defunding of education in this state means that the quality of education is going to go down. The good teachers are going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else, or they're going to retire, or they're going to get into a different profession. And so the quality of education comes down. Well, do you think if somebody gets a job offer here that they're going to want to bring their family here? My wife can't get health care. My kids can't get a good education unless I pay out the nose for it. And all the private schools are religious private schools. And so, it's only set up for like a certain type of person to succeed. And so all of these talented people are going to leave the state and they're going to take their tax dollars with them, which means education is going to be even worse funded. And, all the good things that make a state good and prosperous, they're going to start to dry up. And that is what you are voting for long term. So I want to make sure that your young voter audience that you talk to understands that.
Yeah, and I just want to add, in addition to that, I mean, there's no more evidence, no more prominent evidence for the need of the Department of Education than a Trump rally. When you just
Amen.
ask some of these folks why they're supporting what they're supporting, right? You ask
Hmm.
them, what about January 6th? Oh,
Right,
well, that was probably those were the Democrats actually in disguise, really.
right.
That's where we're. I mean, some of the things that these people believe is bizarre, and we need a strong Department of Education because let's face it, people are becoming less and less informed and more inclined to believe nonsense, and we need to understand that the Department of Education is not just about Title IX. It's not just about school funding. It's also about making sure that we have quality education.
Yeah.
And that's important in this country. That's number one. And number two is I view every issue under one umbrella, and that umbrella is democracy. I
Hmm.
don't think that young people really and not just young people, but everyone. I think that we've heard so much that democracy is at stake. This is the most important election of our lifetimes, that we've become numb to the idea that literally America, as you know it, is literally at stake right now. Trump will have no incentive to have Republican loyalists who are in his ear or people who are loyal to the Constitution to have them in his school. He will do anything he can to maximize his authority, to take control of executive agencies, to defund certain programs that we currently enjoy and take for granted, all in the name of making sure that he punishes his enemies, that he secures power, and possibly even delays, if not suspends, the next presidential election to hold on to power. I mean, this system of that we've enjoyed for almost 250 years of checks and balances, and the Trump presidency has highlighted how much goodwill plays a huge role into that. The transition of
Right.
power,
Yeah.
the the fact that you don't have the executive branch, hovering over the director of the FBI was just something that every administration respected, even Nixon, I mean, to a degree.
Yeah.
but, but this president has no respect for history, no respect for the Constitution, no respect for the rule of law, So when I hear people say, "Yeah, democracy is a state," my issue is uh, transgender bathrooms. Yeah, I heard democracy is at stake, but you know what? And even on the left, my interest is on who can best forgive my student loans, which is a legitimate concern. It
Sure.
kind of reminds me of the Titanic. I don't think we're really understanding that we're in a Titanic situation right now. We can either sink or swim. But you ask folks, what do you want? And they're like, I want to see what's on the dessert. I want to see what's on the dessert menu. It's like we're
Right.
in a situation where we don't understand that we're in an emergency election. Yes, Harris has generated a lot of enthusiasm. Glad for that. Yes, a lot of young people have said that they're going to vote for the first time in their lifetimes, or people who usually were on the sidelines are now getting involved. That's all. It is wonderful. But all of that would mean nothing if we just look at this as purely entertainment and we don't roll our sleeves up and actually vote and get others in our circle to vote. I was at a Democratic meeting the day Biden dropped out. Before anyone knew anything, the local candidates, I'm in the state of Georgia,
Yeah.
they said you have to get at least 15 people in your circle, 15 people in your contact list. Get them to the polls, get them to commit to vote. And I think that if we have that mindset, that if we can get at least 10 people, 15 people, 5 people in our circle to take this election seriously enough to wait online to vote, to make sure that they're registered, to look up the registration deadline. We have states that are actually purging the rolls of folks on the voter rostrum. We need to be
Yep.
aware of those. We can't wait till
Yes.
the last to be surprised that, oh, I can't vote. No, we have to be proactive. We have to be intentional now in the month of August. Yes, the
Right.
convention is exciting. Harris is an attractive candidate. The stakes are high, and we need to make sure that we're doing what we can do to ensure that we're informed and to make sure that we can participate in this democracy. People need to understand there is no greater power as a citizen than the right to vote. And
Amen.
this election, I think, is the most drastic and the most high stakes election going back to 1864. And I say that because 1864 was literally a fork in the road moment. If
Right.
Lincoln had lost that election, we quite possibly could have had the Confederate States of America instead of an entire union of the United States. And I do believe that we're in a fork in the road moment right now. That depending on how this election goes, the system of checks, the Supreme Court has already let you know they're ready to give a rubber stamp to Trump doing anything. So we don't need any more evidence. We need to take this seriously and act accordingly.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to give people some homework right now because people love homework, right? It's that spinach thing you were talking about. We're going to
Yeah.
put Joe Camel on there. People will love it. So, couple of homework assignments, okay? You tell me what you think of this. What you're going to do is you're going to put a calendar reminder in your phone. And so once a week, you're going to go check your voter registration and you're going to make sure it's still there. Okay? From now until the election, you pick a day of the week, whichever day is your favorite. Put a calendar reminder in your phone, make it repeat. Every week you go onto, I believe it is vote.gov, where you can go look up your voter registration, and you go once a week and you look it up and you make sure that it's still there and that it didn't suddenly disappear. So that's the first thing you're going to do. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to organize a voting party. And here's what I mean by that. This is something that we're talking about doing ourselves. So you're going to grab 5 or 10 or 15 friends, however many you can get together, and you're going to say, hey, we're going to do a voting party. Everybody come meet at my house. We'll all carpool to the nearest polling location. We'll all vote. And then afterwards, we're gonna have a party together. We're gonna have like a post-voting party. We're gonna congratulate ourselves. We're gonna have champagne and frittatas, whatever you're into. Choose your own theme for the party. That's just one idea. There's lots of themes. And make it fun. Okay, like get people together. Don't just go stand in that sad, lonely voting line by yourself where you don't know a single soul. Bring friends, turn it into an event, bring however many people you can bring, even if you just bring one other person. You're doing your civic duty and you're helping other people do it too. So, does that sound good to you? You agree with that?
Oh, I completely agree with that. And I also would say, in addition to that, just brush up on the issues. And we were talking about young
Yes.
people,
Mm-hmm.
but young people, a lot of times, we make decisions based on like as if we're voting for class president. We can't
Yes.
just vote based on charisma. We can't vote based on who do I like best, who can I have a beer with. No, we have to be intentional about where we're putting our votes, not just for the president, but for Senate. Look, this is important. A lot of people complain, oh, well, why didn't Obama get this done? And why didn't Obama? Let me tell you something. In 2010, we should have came out in even more numbers than we came in
Mm-hmm.
2008.
Yep.
Had we done that, we possibly could have seen the very things you're complaining you're not seeing. We cannot afford to make that mistake with Kamala Harris, right? Biden, the reason why I think he's one of the best presidents is because he was literally working with his hand tied behind his back. Mansion and cinema were the thorns in his side for the first 2 years at least of his
Yes.
presidency. And we can't afford to have another mansion or cinema moment. We need not just a majority, we need an overwhelming majority. I understand the
That's right.
pundits are saying, oh, the likelihood of this happening. I mean, polls, I stopped trusting in polls in 2016 when
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
Hillary lost the presidency, the most qualified person to ever seek the office of president,
Yeah.
lost to a man who never held an office, who didn't have
Yeah.
any kind of idea of the history behind the office or an appreciation for the Constitution. So for take the polls and do what my favorite professor Alan Lichtman of American University says, consign them to the entrails of goats. Focus on just voting, right? Because if we vote, Kamala Harris has this slogan, when we fight, we win. What is this true? Forget the polls, right? When we vote, things like 2022 happened. What 20 polls told us in 2022 a red wave was coming.
Right.
Historic and analytically, pundits were saying, well, this is what's going to happen. And what happened? It was a little splash.
Yeah.
We can not just stop Republican momentum this time, but we can actually usher in a blue wave, which makes more sense than a red wave. And I'm looking forward to that because when we're looking at the issues at play, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, all of the things that the Biden administration was not yet able to accomplish, the codification of Roe versus Wade, more environmental protections, the two major wars, right? That people are think, there's a lot of protests going on about Gaza. If Trump gets his way, Israel's getting a completely blank check, and Ukraine is going to be just conceded to Russia.
Right.
We have to be intentional about how we vote, and I just want to encourage people to brush up on um, the issues at play. If the economy is something that is your selling point, look at the economy side by side. Trump blew up the deficit by nearly $2 trillion. The Biden administration has gotten the deficit has gotten inflation below 3%, first time since 2021. Job creation has been consistent. To go back to at least the 1990s to have this much consecutive job growth, you know,
Right.
things are looking on the up, but they can easily change if we get complacent, if we get lazy, if we're not informed, and we throw away our votes or just decide to not vote at all.
I love this. Okay, everybody, go vote, do your calendar reminder, get your vote party planned, and together we can consign Donald Trump's memory to the entrails of goats. Mike, I want to thank you so much for being here. This was a great discussion. Everybody, go follow Mike. Mike, tell the people where they can go find you. I want all my audience to go and subscribe to your channel, so tell them where you're at.
Thank you, Andrew. This was a wonderful discussion. I'm so grateful and honored to be on the show. My show is called The Political Mic. It is centered on young people. Tomorrow, I'll have the opportunity and privilege of having Chris Matthews, the former host of Hardball on MSNBC, as a guest. He's a regular on the show. He's been on the show a few times before. We usually have panel discussions with young people. So if you're interested in getting the insight of the future of politics, the future of political thought, this is the platform for you. It's called The Political Mic. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. It's also available on YouTube. So I'm hoping that you tune in. We've been also covering the convention every night. It's been a wonderful discussion so far, and I look forward to having you join us.
All right, sounds great. Thank you guys so much for watching. Mike, thank you so much for being here. Go do your homework and enjoy the rest of the convention.